economics isn't the study of money, it's the study of well-being. As I said, artificial intelligence has massive potential, and the likeliest case is that it sends us to levels of prosperity that we can barely imagine right now.
Andrew Lee is an economist, Australian MP and author of The Shortest History of Economics.
Once you get to the point where it outperforms us, then it will invent things that we don't even imagine.
Robots to humans are going to be like humans to pets.
It's got a way to go to replace your reading skills, mate. I think you're safe for now. You're all right for now, mate. Don't worry about it. I genuinely loved your book. So the story behind how this ended up, and I'm not just saying that. I picked your book up in an airport on the way on holiday because, you know, when I go to relax on holiday, I like to read economics books.
Who doesn't?
Yeah, exactly, exactly. Well, this is what we do. I read it in 2 days and I messaged my producer and said, we need to get this guy on because I think it's the best, like, story-based economics book I've ever read in terms of just making things really simple and clear and understandable. It's a talent. You start with a beautiful story around light.
So if we look at the amount of time that it used to take to produce the same amount of light that a modern electric light bulb produces in an hour, that was 58 hours. 58 hours of foraging for wood. And then lamps came along and suddenly that got down to 41 hours. And then we had more advanced lamp technologies so that by the time you got to the 1700s, it was down to about 5 hours to produce an hour's worth of light. But still, 5 hours work for an hour of light meant that only the very rich in the 1700s could afford to read. And then over recent years, we've had electrification and improvements in light technology, and now it would take a second or two of work for you to afford an hour of light. And most of us leave lights on when we leave the room without even thinking of it. So there's two kind of big stories out of that, Damien. One is the improvement in technology, and the other is the huge increase in productivity. Going from 58 hours of work for an hour of light to just a couple of seconds of work really is a marker of what modern economics and modern capitalism has brought to many of our lives.
Yeah, and on the human level, it means that you don't have to spend all day finding food and finding light. You can think, what else are we going to do? And basically everything that is around us is born out of removing the necessity of just spending all day looking for logs to burn. It's kind of, you know, the Renaissance. Everything we have is because we solved quick light.
I think you also said it's 300,000 times more efficient to make light now than it was back then, which is like just a crazy comparison.
It is amazing, isn't it, T? 300,000-fold increase. And of course, that means that suddenly our evenings can be so much more productive. You know, you think that for 99% of human history, when the sun went down, people stopped doing a whole lot of things. And now we've opened up our evenings. And indeed, I'm speaking to you from Australia in the evening, an opportunity that just wouldn't have been there for the vast majority of human history. So I loved writing The Shortest History of Economics because it is the story of the world through the lens of economics and the story of the development of the discipline of economics, how we came to think at the margin, to ignore sunk costs, to engage in cost-benefit analysis. All of those fairly simple tools that make economics such a powerful discipline in our lives.
So I spent 10 to 15 years living in Manchester, and I would recognise the B on the front cover as the Manchester B. Why did you choose to put that B on the front cover? I'm guessing it's not because you love the northwest of England.
Well, I do love Manchester, and I do love the fact that the Royal Economic Society in the UK has the B as its logo. And it reflects the fact that economics isn't the study of money, it's the study of well-being. And the B symbolises not just industry, but also cooperation. And so much of what we achieve in the modern economy is through cooperation. My friend Justin Wolfers likes to say that economics is no more about money than architecture is about feet and inches. Money is a yardstick, but the goal we're trying to maximise is happiness or well-being, or what economists will sometimes call utility.
Can we talk about teamwork then in the modern context? Because you speak a lot around tariffs in your book, and you liken them to putting rocks in your own harbour, essentially, when it comes to, you know, what it does to a country. It feels that the tariff regimes that are emerging out of the Trump government seem to be anti-teamwork in a way. The world seems to be going a different way. So what, with you put a B on the front cover, what do you think about the state of teamwork in the world today?
Well, teamwork involves specialisation. When you're part of a team, you're not trying to do everything. You're recognising that you focus on what you do best and you rely on others to do their job. So if you're on the football field and you're a forward, then there's someone else who's in the backs who's defending the goal. So too in the modern economy, where most of us don't cut our own hair or fix our own cars or make our own clothes. We do what we do best and pay others to do what they do best. And that's true of countries as well. When countries specialise, then prosperity rises. And that notion of specialisation has been one of the key drivers for trade. It was the great Cambridge economist Joan Robinson, who many thought would be the first woman to win the Nobel Prize in economics, who talked about putting rocks in your harbours as being what countries do when they impose tariffs. The biggest losers out of tariffs are your own country's consumers themselves. And that's why even if a trading partner chooses to put rocks in their harbours, it doesn't make sense to retaliate by putting rocks in your harbour.
So you think the right response is to basically not respond then and not to, we had that escalation, didn't we, between China and America, where it got pretty hairy, where every day they were just slapping on these new tariffs and it was kind of like they were playing chicken. You think the right thing to do is go, okay, well, if you're going to do that, we're just not going to, because we don't want to inflict self-harm, essentially.
Precisely. If another country says it's going to hurt its own citizens, why would you respond by hurting your citizens? The main losers out of tariffs are a country's own people, and governments should be looking after their people first and foremost. So the reductions in tariffs that we've seen around the world in the post-war decades have brought huge prosperity, allowing countries to specialise. So Switzerland does high-end pharmaceuticals. There's a great wine trade out of places like Spain and Portugal and Italy. We have Australia specialising in mining and various forms of advanced manufacturing. And of course, Britain does very well in financial services. So sticking to your knitting, focusing on what you do best, has raised living standards, created jobs and allowed people to live lives of much greater prosperity than if every country tried to do everything ourselves. That'd be a bit like trying to make your own clothes, grow your own food, make your own smartphone. Maybe you could do half of that, but you'd be way less prosperous and probably less happy as a result.
I'm going to say that Australia has some pretty good wine as well. I like a Sauvignon Blanc from your region of the world. Or is that New Zealand? Sorry, I probably just offended you deeply there.
No. We'll do the full range. And I remember Jacob's Creek for a while was the top-selling wine in London. So we've done pretty well at various price points.
Yeah. And is it the Jammy Roo or whatever? My mate loved a bottle of that as the post lash. He'd be like, let's get it's like a dessert bottle of wine, the Jammy Red Roo or whatever, with the kangaroo on the front. Okay, sorry. Yeah, I just offended a whole nation there. So let's move on, shall we? We're going to get some tariffs now as a result of this.
You won't be surprised to know that when those wines are selling in Australia, they don't typically have as many kangaroos and koalas on the label. So we're probably tailoring it for the market.
What, do they have like British tea bags on them or something like this? Bit of a crumpet on the front. So you say that the tariffs lead to prosperity, but when I was reading your book, it made me think that there was protectionism within imperial nations in the past, and it feels like they kind of brought the drawbridge up a bit. There was protectionist regimes around some of the great powers that we saw emerge, wasn't there?
Yeah, there certainly was, Damien. And partly that was because those countries didn't have income taxes and didn't have consumption taxes. Tariffs are a really easy tax to impose. You just wait until a ship comes into the harbour and you say, well, if you want to unload your stuff, then you'll need to pay us 10, 20, 30, 40, 50% of the value. But as countries have gotten more sophisticated, we've realised that income taxes, company taxes and consumption taxes can all be efficiently levied, and it's much better to raise revenue through those sources than through tariffs.
Now, we started there talking about the productivity gains, and the story of light would make you think that it was this kind of like linear growth in productivity. T, have you got that stat about Japan that you could read out?
Yeah, let me pull it up.
Because you're so good at reading.
I'm the reading expert on this podcast. In Japan, the average real income was $2.80 a day
In the year 1000.
in the year. I was literally like, in 1000. In the year 1000, the average real income was $2.80. And in 1700, it was $2.90.
So in 700 years, it went up by 10 cents. So it doesn't feel like much productivity gain in that period. Do you find that the productivity gains are really lumpy and that we can have, I mean, in that case, multiple generations that would have seen no increase in their living standards relative to their grandfathers, their great-great-great-grandfathers potentially?
Yeah, I mean, that's the story of human existence to a large extent. We saw an agricultural revolution that allowed population to increase, but really didn't boost living standards per person all that much. It used to be the case that through the Dark Ages, artisans would carve their prices on the wall, knowing that they wouldn't change much from one generation to the next. And then you see this transformation in the late 1700s in a little island off the coast of Europe where suddenly there is an explosion of gadgets, of innovation and technology that becomes the Industrial Revolution and transforms the world. As the Industrial Revolution flows out from Britain to the rest of the world, suddenly people come to expect increases in living standards. And now it's just taken for granted that each generation will live better than the one that preceded it, and that the average living standard will double every generation or two. That's normal now, but would have been remarkable for the vast majority of our prehistoric ancestors.
Do you think that's still going on till today? Because you wrote in the book that in the 1940s, how much you could earn, I think 9 out of 10 people would earn more than their parents. But I think in the 1980s, when we were born, I think it's 50%? Yeah, only half people can expect to earn more than their parents. So what's causing this change in our earning potential?
Yeah, it's partly inequality and it's partly a decline in the growth rate. But certainly that lack of advancement from one generation to the next compared to the end of World War II is pretty stark. That slowdown has been quite substantial in some countries. Others have continued to increase prosperity over time. And it really does turn on how well you manage to boost the skills of your population and capture the gains of technology. Right now, if we're able to harness artificial intelligence as a growth engine, it's got the potential to do for living standards what the steam engine and electrification and these other past general purpose technologies achieved. So it's an exciting moment as we look at how artificial intelligence could again boost living standards and get that productivity motor going, which has been spluttering a bit in many advanced countries.
So, Mr. Akarole, I hear you are a salesman.
Elite salesman, yes.
One of the best, they say?
I've got a little bit of experience in the game, yeah, I could say.
Done a few deals.
I bill.
What would your compliance team say about you?
They would say that I am always nagging them and that essentially I have beef with compliance. I love the team. Compliance slows down all my deals because every time I get to the finish line, they've got to check documents, KYC, GDPR, and it's just a nightmare. It slows the deal down by like 2-3 weeks.
It's
sometimes.
always on both sides as well, isn't it? Sometimes it can be block on the other side.
Exactly.
Well, that's where today's sponsor can help.
Indeed. Vanta helps companies of all sizes get secure and compliant fast, and they stay that way.
They do it by automating compliance with over 35 security and privacy frameworks like SOC 2, ISO 27001, and HIPAA.
Yeah, all of them. And this saves businesses so much time and money.
According to a recent IDC study, Vanta customers save over $500,000 a year in costs.
Not bad.
And they also help you complete security questionnaires up to 5 times faster, which is great because everybody hates filling out forms. If you're a business that needs to prove security and compliance, visit vanta.com/making money to sign up for a completely free demo today.
Your book terrified the crap out of me at the end because it says that AI might be like the last human invention and that the AI will the robots are going to be amazing and they're going to be like we are. Robots to humans are going to be like humans to pets.
It's got a way to go to replace your reading skills, mate. So I think you're safe for now. You're all right for now, mate. Don't worry about it.
So yeah, do you think it will be the last human invention, AI? Like it's all going to be doomsday for us? Because that's kind of how you ended
Yeah,
the book.
I do, T. I mean, once you get to the point where we have artificial general intelligence, where it outperforms us, then it will invent things that we don't even imagine. And the question is how we ensure that super intelligence is aligned with human capability. When they survey researchers working on artificial intelligence and say, once it exceeds human capacity, what's the chance you think that the world ends? Those researchers give numbers around 5%. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I wouldn't get on a plane that had a 5% chance of crashing. I wouldn't open my front door if I thought there was a 5% chance that an asteroid would fall on my head that day. So that's a risk which is big and which we need to reduce. For many technologies, we've built the safety standards around them as they've developed. For this one, we probably want to build the guardrails before we build the highway. As I said, artificial intelligence has massive potential, and the likeliest case is that it sends us to levels of prosperity that we can barely imagine right now. But we've got to get that chance of catastrophe down from 5% to 0 in order to really benefit from the technology.
You run the risk of stifling the development of the technology potentially if you do that. And I think back to like the nuclear bomb and the Hadron Collider, and the scientists around those were like, we don't really know what's going to happen when we let this thing off. So, yeah. I mean, you would roll the dice, right? You take a 50-50 bet. But there's the fear of like, you know, Terminator, let's call it that. But a fear that I think is I want to put to you, because you are a politician as much as you are an economist, is how do you as a policymaker ensure that the productivity gains are given to the people and not just hoovered up in share price or for, you know, the owners of the businesses, say like Google, Meta, how does it make sure it just doesn't go to Mark Zuckerberg?
Yeah, so Damien, it's partly about having good competition laws around it, making sure that we don't have a single monopoly engine. You look at the internet search market in the late 1990s, there's a dozen internet search engines out there. Now, we've basically just got one. And AI engines have some of the characters of search. You know, data matters a lot. There's only a certain amount of expertise. People tend to flock to the best algorithm. So having good competition laws around it will matter. And then ensuring that people have the training in order to be able to use AI capably. AI is wreaking havoc on homework and take-home assignments right now. But in the education system, we do need to be training people to get the very most out of the artificial intelligence because it's such a powerful tool for being able to work smarter.
Rethink the education, not like how do we stop the AI, maybe the answer, right? Like, because, you know, the way we educate people, maybe you go, oh, they're getting all the answers from AI, what do we do? Maybe you go, well, that's the world we live in now. How do we teach them a better way to be, you know?
Like Damien was just saying, how do you make sure the money goes to the right people? Because with market concentration, as you mentioned, there are firms like, ExxonMobil, you said they've got the same economic output as Peru, and companies like Walmart have the same economic output as Thailand. So all of these big companies are taking over the market, but they're also very big in AI. So how do you kind of navigate when they've got like a monopoly on the area?
Yeah, I mean, the UK approach of having a Digital Markets Act and regulating the big monopolies in a way that they're designated once they hit a certain size is something which I think a lot of countries are looking pretty seriously at, recognising that, as the old line from Spider-Man goes, with great power comes great responsibility, and that we do need to make sure that regulation kicks into gear. But I guess, you know, to Damien's point before, this is a technology with amazing productivity potential. So we certainly don't want to stifle that. We want the guardrails around to make sure it doesn't end the world. We want monopoly rules in place to make sure we don't have a single firm dominating. But then we just want to look at all of the different applications for it. And we're seeing them every day. You know, I play with my kids on the AI video creating algorithms. I use AI as an editor whenever I'm writing something. It's a very diligent stunt editor. We use artificial intelligence in, it'll even, heaven forbid, produce a podcast of a couple of people talking about a report. So there's all kinds of fun uses, and I think every day each of us look at it and think, "Oh, that's it's not quite doing my job as well as I do, but damn, it's a lot closer than it was last year."
Have you named your AI yet, Andrew? Have you given it a name? Like, have you personified your
I have
assistant?
not. What's yours called, Damien?
Charlie. It named itself. I asked it what it wanted to be called, and it said, "I want to be called Charlie." And I said, "Does that make you a man or a woman?" And I was like, it said, "I think that's why I picked the name Charlie, because then it's up to you." And I was like, bloody hell, this thing's going to eat me alive.
That is,
Like,
yeah, that's
I was like,
terrifying.
we're done. We are cooked.
It's that moment that it just throws a bit of humour in where you don't expect it, where you really feel like you're talking to something human. And it is just autocomplete on steroids, but there's a lot of times it doesn't feel that way.
Yeah, I recently interviewed someone from Cambridge University who was part of the team whose research developed Cambridge Analytica. So he wasn't behind Cambridge Analytica, but he was the guy that figured out that you could tell more about people from what they like on Facebook than their own partners could about their behavior. And he basically said that we've been modeling what is AI good at and what is it not good at, and it's already at the average person in basically most tasks. It's as creative as the average person, as, intelligent, blah, blah, blah. So we're only a couple of years in. And he said, my best guess is that there's nothing that's innately human that this thing can't replace. Maybe compassion and empathy are things, like it's the emotional stuff. And I alluded to it before about education. And my worry is if we try and make the AI bend to the world that we have today, we miss the opportunity, in the sense of my nan will have told me that I should learn how to read a map as an essential skill, but she never saw that Google Maps would eliminate the need in 99.9% of cases to get the A to Z out so that I could figure out where to go, on the way home. And I wonder, is AI like that? Should we be telling kids that they need to be able to read academic papers when this thing might be able to read every academic paper in a few seconds and spit out an answer to them? Should we free up their minds to pursue other things beyond traditional learning?
Yeah, I was thinking about this. There's the London taxi drivers test. The knowledge is famous for how rigorous it is and how tough it is for a London cabbie to learn all of the streets they need to know. And then in the era of GPS, you wonder whether you still need it. But I was remembering back to a great study they did with London cabbies where they measured the way in which their brains worked and found that there was a real improvement in brain capacity as a result of going through the knowledge. I feel like maybe there's some of that going on in the education system too, where learning to be able to sit down and read a Jane Austen or understand a Shakespeare play it does something good for your brain in the way that simply getting that summary spat out from ChatGPT doesn't give you the same thing. So my first instinct would be to move to in-class assessment and still have that rigour in the education system, knowing that our education system won't be perfectly fitted to the technology of tomorrow, but being aware that just a system where we ask all the kids to phone it in and allow everyone to simply ask the AI for their answers isn't giving them anything. And at that point, why would you bother getting an education if really all you're doing is just entering your essay question into ChatGPT and printing out the answer for the professor?
Yeah, it's a great point. And you also need to be able to critically look at it and go, that doesn't feel right. And if you've never learned how to read Shakespeare and kind of how he does his thing, you're never going to look at the answer of ChatGPT and go, I don't think that that's actually right. You need that critical judgment, don't you?
If you're going to be a groundling at the Globe for a night, then you're going to get a whole lot more out of it. If you've actually gone through the process of studying a Shakespeare play, it's going to bring you a whole lot more pleasure than if you show up without ever having immersed yourself in a Shakespeare play. I loved studying Henry IV in Year 12, and I don't want to take away that experience from future generations.
Before we move on, I just want to finish on the AI thing, because I think it's really interesting to speak to someone that's on the policy side of things as well. Are you optimistic about it for the globe? And how do you see Australia's position? And are you worried that, the big guns in this AI race appear to be China, America? Does that concern you? Like, as a Brit, we're always talking about, are we being left behind here,
Britain is certainly one of the creators of the AI engines, and I think that's important for the economy. For Australia, there's lots of applications using AI, but the foundational AI engines aren't operated out of here. We're seeing big productivity benefits, impacts on coders, consultants. Every law firm I talk to is engaged with it. I was chatting with people in an insurance company today who say they have these voluminous PDF documents all organised differently, which they've had to page through. And now their customer support officers can very quickly have the AI pull up the key pieces when they're dealing with a claims processing application. And that means they can do it faster. So that's better for their customers. We're seeing the impacts in marketing and design. A whole lot of those creative fields are becoming more creative as a result. I reckon it's a pretty exciting time to be alive, but of course it's going to have impacts on what the labour market looks like, just as every other general purpose technology has done.
So T, recently we had a conversation with tax expert Dan Needle, and I think one thing that became very apparent is you're going to have a real big crypto tax bill.
I am.
What are you going to do with the money, mate? Where are you going to put it?
I don't know. Like every year tax season comes around and I'm stressing. I'm like, how much is my bill going to be?
I'll tell you how I do it. What's important for me is that money, that tax money, is completely separate to every other bit of money in my life, because otherwise I start counting it as mine. I start locking it away in the stock market or whatever. So I use a tied instant saver account that's just attached to my business, and I just put the money in there and keep it in there, and that's solely for the tax.
You can just ping over to tax man when it's tax time.
I just know it's allocated for, and the stress that takes off me is worth its weight in gold.
Every January I'm stressing.
Check that out, mate. We've got a bit here actually about how you can check it out yourselves. I'll let you read it out because you're the best at reading.
I mean, I'm the star reader of the show. If you're a sole trader or company owner, check out Tide. New members can get up to 4% AER variable for 6 months. I say up to because it depends on how much you deposit in your account. The more you save, the higher the rate.
You can get this deal, plus you can get £100 cash back if you fund your Tide Instant Saver account with £5,000 in the first 30 days. You get that by using the code MAKINGMONEY. Terms and conditions apply. The code is Making Money, all one word, and you'll find the full terms and conditions and all details of the offer in the description below. The variable rate is correct as of the 7th of August 2025. So you mentioned inequality before. You have an equation around inequality within the book. Do you remember it before I put you on there? Or I've got it written down here, but I don't know. Can you tell me what it is?
Yeah, so this is Thomas Piketty's idea that inequality is a function of the rate of return on capital and the economic growth rate. And when the rate of return on capital is higher than the economic growth rate, then you get a rise in inequality. If society is growing fast, if GDP is growing faster than capital, then inequality goes down. It's a pretty good model, particularly for looking at inequality in the period up to World War II. In recent years, some of what's been going on with inequality is actually the gap between high-paid workers and low-paid workers rather than the gap between labour and capital. But R versus G has gotten Thomas Piketty turned from a data wonk into a household name in many circles, and that's a pretty exciting thing for the economics profession.
What and can you give us an example of capital? So for the audience, like what that might mean in the real world.
Yeah, so a share portfolio will earn a lot. You might think about investment homes as well, which were very common for much of history. It's only in recent years that more than half the population's owned a home. It used to be the case that the vast majority of people rented a home, and then the land was owned by a small group of people. So that difference between the property owners and the non-property owners has been the defining divide, which has driven inequality in the past. Increasingly now in many countries, as home ownership is slipping out of reach of younger generations, we are seeing a bit of a return to that.
Yeah, so when the return on assets, capital, is growing faster than the output of a country measured by GDP, inequality rises. The people with the assets pull away from the general population who don't own the assets. Yeah, okay. Do you think that the ownership of assets is a function of luck in many cases? That those people that have their capital have got their, because of timing or because they were a certain generation or...
Well, none of us chooses the country we were born into or our parents, and that's a big determinant as to where you start and what assets you begin with. You look at somebody like Donald Trump, for example, who was born into a family where his dad was a property developer, and that gave a significant start in terms of where he was at on the property ladder. Plenty of people who grow up in households with nothing work their guts out but don't have a chance to become asset holders. So yes, hard work matters, but luck matters as well.
Donald Trump was self-made, wasn't he?
Yeah, fully self-made, mate.
The American dream.
Never got a penny from his dad.
Yeah.
You also mentioned in your book that a lot of your, using big data, like a lot of your network is based on kind of like your wealth, I guess.
Yeah, so social networks are certainly big in terms of your ability to have an impact. Some of the work that Raj Chetty has done in his Opportunity Insights Lab at Harvard has explored the way in which social networks have an impact and finds that in some parts of the United States, people are much more likely to be able to move up the income ladder than in other parts. There seems to be a tendency in some parts of the US for societies to pitch in together to look after those who are most vulnerable and therefore to create more of an escalator of opportunity. In other places, there seems to be a bigger gap between the haves and the have-nots, and that's a local social safety net doesn't work in the same way.
I want to come back to the luck thing because I think my favourite part of the book was your description around luck, around the shape of continents, and how that has basically made me who I am today.
Yeah, no, Damien, I shouldn't claim any credit for this. This is Jared Diamond's insight from Guns, Germs and Steel, where he points out that in long continents, in order to migrate, you need to move into a different climatic band. So you need to learn new skills. You need to learn how to survive moving from the plains up into the mountains, moving from a cold climate to a hotter climate. Whereas if you've got a wide continent, then you can migrate while staying in the same climatic band. You can move east and west rather than having to move north and south. And so if you look at the continents, you'll notice that Africa and the Americas tend to be long continents, while Europe tends to be a wide continent. So one of the benefits for Europeans historically has been that ability to stick in the same climate band but check out a new neighbourhood. Aligned with that, there's also better crops, more domesticable crops and more domesticable animals in Europe. If you turned up in Australia and tried to domesticate kangaroos, it turns out to be a whole lot harder than domesticating sheep.
Easier to just slap them on a bottle of wine and sell them that way. Yeah, and it's the sharing of the technology, right? So, the technology that works for farming in France also works in Germany potentially, whereas at the tips of Africa, maybe not. And that spread of technology allows us to build surplus of agriculture, which we could then put into armies, which we could then go and take over Africa with, essentially. It was like the route that I got to through the book. Is that correct, do you think?
Yeah, that's right. And so if you've got the big question, why did Europe colonise Africa rather than the other way around, then part of it is the prosperity that comes from the shape of continents, from the domesticable plants and animals that allow the agricultural revolution to take place earlier in the Middle East and Europe than it did in Africa and the Americas. That allows the building up of a surplus, the creation of armies, the creation of a parasite class, call them politicians if you like, who are working working off the gains of others. You simply can't have that when you're a subsistence hunter-gatherer society where everyone's living so close to the breadline that you don't have that surplus that allows you to build up a standing army.
Why have like the Middle East and Asia been the dominant force throughout history, apart from say the last 100 to 200 years where the West has emerged? It might have even been Hamish McRae who said it, but we had someone on who said it's always been about Asia. We're just living in this moment where it's about the West.
So China has benefited from having a single unitary political system. It's always been a big country, and that's allowed it to build up considerable surplus. And one of the reasons why Chinese innovations were very strong, if you go back to the classic technologies of the compass, gunpowder, and printing of the period around 1000. China, though, has had moments where it's made the wrong policy choices. The Song dynasty is wonderfully open and engaged with the world and willing to take ideas and encourage innovation. But subsequent dynasties were much more nervous, shut off contact with outsiders, suppressed the scientific advances, and tended to govern with the notion that the ruler knows best, rather than with that curious scientific approach, which is so good for encouraging innovation and the prosperity that flows from it.
Where do you think they are right now?
Oh, definitely back on the innovation side. You look at what China is doing with drones, both in terms of delivery of people and also the low-flying air taxis. China is leading the world with that at the moment. The Chinese electric vehicle rollout is substantial. China's integration of apps has been large as well. Now, of course, all that's occurring within a pretty strict surveillance state, which is being used to prevent Chinese people from speaking ill of their rulers. And there's a question as to how sustainable it is to have such a restrictive society when it comes to talking about politics and whether you can do that and still encourage innovation successfully.
How does the world react to China is a big question, and I think it's always been we want what they have, so we'll kind of do what they say in certain aspects. But I know that Australia took a stance of you basically push back on them around certain trade elements, and it showed that countries do have something that China want. I don't know how much you can talk about this. I know you're a politician and I don't want to get you into trouble, but what do you think about foreign policy towards China and how countries should kind of stand up to the might that is their production and their capacity and the things that we want, and so that we can have our place in the world without just being pushed around by America or China?
Yeah, I mean, it's no secret that there's strategic contestation in the Pacific and that the current Chinese administration has more ambitious goals for China's role in the region than was true in the past. And it's also the case that Australia is deeply enmeshed with China, as many other countries. I think it's more than 100 countries in the world have China as their top trading partner. So that's something we navigate. When China put limits on Australian exports, we chose not to retaliate, but instead just to make the case for open markets. And over recent years, some $20 billion of restrictions on Australian exports to China have been taken off. So we welcome that, but that's just the new reality, not just for Australia, but for many other countries around the world. Our prosperity benefits from China. Chinese people also benefit from Australian exports, including the iron ore and coal that helps to make Chinese skyscrapers. So that complementarity of economies is important, and I think probably provides a little bit of ballast to the relationship. You know, it's not the case that countries that trade never get into conflict, but it does tend to be the case that a strong trading relationship makes conflict less likely. So we should welcome that economic engagement.
And do you think the economic engagement is seen as the same on both sides? So I maybe look at Elon Musk, and do you think he regrets being so open around his technology with electric cars? Do you have those concerns?
Yeah, I mean, I think each country is going to make its own decision there, but there's certainly a benefit to the Chinese production ecosystem, which has been extraordinarily efficient, and the benefits that then brings in terms of all of the goods in our homes. You know, for most of us, if you took out everything with a Made in China label on it, then we'd think our homes had been robbed.
I'd be missing an arm probably, yes. It's pretty pervasive, isn't it? It's everywhere.
Yeah, and it's an indication as to how much we benefit through trade again, and how much poorer we would be if we had to make all of those things locally. So it's not. I'm not pretending that these are easy questions for policymakers to make their way through, but I think they become much harder if you have the idea of just cutting yourself off entirely from a country which is such a big share of global manufacturing output.
We had a guest on called Russell Napier, and he put forward this really interesting discussion around the role of China and how the policy around China has been incorrect, in the sense of they came forward and they basically produced all these cheap goods that could have acted as a deflationary force in the world. And what policymakers did instead was they inflated the money supply into that, or they tried to maintain inflation at 2% because of this, this is what they thought it should be. And his argument was we probably missed out on a global opportunity to reduce prices a lot significantly because, someone like Amazon, Jeff Bezos, that ability to make things in China for really cheap. Do you think that policymakers have been wrong around inflation and how we've handled that in face of the manufacturing output of China? Would you agree with him or?
Yeah, I mean, deflation causes problems of its own, and so having inflation target bands which target a low but positive level of inflation, I think is the right way of going. And certainly if you look at the first couple of decades of the 21st century, the period after China entered the World Trade Organization, you do see reductions in prices of a lot of consumer goods, and inflation then being driven by sectors such as health and education and housing, which are sort of homemade goods. So that mix does show up in the inflation statistics, and the well-being gain that comes from a lot of consumer goods being cheaper over the decades has been really remarkable. I look at how much TV you can buy for your pound these days, and it's just multiples of what it was a couple of decades back.
Yeah, I remember one of my family friends getting this TV that was like a widescreen, and it was as deep as it was wide, and it basically had to be craned into the house. And now you can pick these things up for a couple of £100, and they're much bigger, and they're this thick. Technology is. You look at technology, you go, why hasn't everything else done that? Why hasn't everything else gone that way, improved and got cheaper? Everything seems to have got a bit worse and a lot more expensive.
And you think about, if housing had gone the same way, then suddenly homes would be abundant and accessible rather than being out of reach of so many young families. So we've done very well in some categories of products, but we need to do better on others. And economists need to take part of the responsibility for that. We need to do a better job of thinking through how to make housing abundant.
Yeah, I can't have an Australian on and not talk about your pension system, because I think it's probably the envy of the Western world at the minute. I mean, I've been reading recently that there are some concerns. I talked positively about superannuation and in my comments, and I had a few Australians that watched the channel that were like, "Oh, there's things around it that aren't as positive at the minute in the news cycle." But you are probably 20 years ahead in terms of this kind of auto enrollment pension system, and you've led the way in that, and it seems to be going well. What do you think then, what things have gone well in your pension system over the last 20 years, and what things do you think, I wish we'd done those a little bit better, because it seems like we're just going to follow your lead, with this? And what would you say to policymakers in the UK that are looking to copy your system about what they should copy and what they shouldn't?
Yeah, so one of the geniuses of Paul Keating when he was Australian Prime Minister was universal superannuation. The idea that regular workers would be best off if they made contributions which then accrued at the rate at which the share market was increasing. That started off with a fairly modest level of contribution, but from the 1st of July this year goes to 12%. and that allows a pretty substantial set of savings to build up for the typical Australian. It was originally built on a model of active choice. That was probably a mistake of the early 90s, and behavioural economics has taught us that most people don't get actively involved with their retirement savings. Life's too interesting, there's too many other things to do. So increasingly our policymakers have moved towards making sure that the system is run with good defaults. The other thing we've shifted around on is getting the costs down. Superannuation shouldn't cost a couple of percent a year to run. It should be run off tens of basis points. And so getting the costs of super down helps boost retirement savings. But we're now at the stage where many Australians are retiring with substantial superannuation, and that takes the pressure off the government pension system. You don't have the concerns about the sustainability of retirement savings in Australia that I think are really testing the budgets of many other advanced countries.
Is it benefiting everyone? Are there some Australians that are retiring with small balances, or that the superannuation system hasn't worked for them?
Absolutely. Look, there's a big gender issue here. So we know that women with kids over their lifetimes can earn sometimes just half as much as the typical bloke. If you're getting a percentage of that going into superannuation, then that's going to affect superannuation balances. If you're in a couple and you stay together over the course of a life, then of course the superannuation gets shared. But for somebody who separates, or for a single parent, then that can be quite consequential. So, we're making a change now to pay superannuation on paid parental leave, which helps to narrow that gap a little, and looking at other ways in which we can narrow the gender gap in superannuation. But that's one of the things we're thinking about now in order to make sure that everyone benefits from those private retirement accounts.
I think one of the things that I liked most, it was Paul Keating, is that right? Sorry, I don't want to say his name and get it wrong. Was the wording and the communication around the launch of superannuation that I think was handled so well. He made it really clear that this was your money. Like, I looked at a lot of the marketing and advertising at the time, and I think one thing the UK's done really badly is it's not fostered a sense of ownership in pensions. People feel kind of distanced from the money, and they probably feel like it's a tax more than it is theirs. How did you guys convince them, like 12%? Because this is, I think the big UK problem is we're at 8% and we're stuck. And I think any rise in that will be seen as a tax. So you got to 12%. Was it over a couple of decades, or, how did you convince the public that you were going to keep ratcheting that up and that was a good thing for them?
Yeah, I mean, it's over more than 30 years that it's taken us to go to that level, and it has involved public communications exercise, never as convincing as Paul Keating. I mean, he wasn't just a great economic reformer, he was also the best political communicator Australia's ever seen, and having that in a Prime Minister is pretty remarkable, and was really important when superannuation was just getting going and you had to paint a picture of what this would mean. It really communication really matters for something like retirement savings, where the benefits are so far off that you've got to paint a picture, sell a case to people. It's not like you're going to get this thing tomorrow. This is going to be there for you in decades' time. Paul did a great job of articulating the case for that, and I think my party has always been strongly committed to superannuation and in strengthening the system, bringing more people into it, reducing the overheads, and making sure that it is something which is broadly available, providing assets to the middle class. And potentially offsetting inequality. Going back to that R versus G point we're talking about before, where the rate of return on capital benefits not just those at the very top, but the typical Australian through their retirement accounts.
Yeah, your typical Aussie's got some R. They got some skin in the game
Exactly.
And capital, basically, so they can benefit. Yeah. Poor Tremaine, his headphone isn't working, so he's here in silence.
They most set me up, I think.
No, this is just all part of the AI test, mate. See if we can replace you. Do you want to ask a question? I can take my headphone out. Yeah, okay, there we go.
Thank you. Just a quick one to finish up. I found it really interesting in the book you were talking about money and happiness and how money can buy love, or it can't buy love.
Yeah, Tamaine, this is some research done by my friends Betsy Stevenson and Justin Wolfers. They were dealing with something called the Easterlin paradox, which was the suggestion early on in the economics of happiness that once you got to a certain level of happiness, a certain level of income in a country, that more income didn't buy more happiness. It turned out that was really just an artefact of bad data. We only had surveys for a dozen or so countries, and with a small sample, it looked like happiness was capping out. But now Gallup has been surveying happiness in more than 150 countries around the world, and it turns out the relationship between the log of a country's per capita GDP and its happiness is almost a straight line. Countries tend to be happier when income goes up, and not just happiness, but also other metrics. In more affluent countries, people are less likely to say they experience pain, more likely to say they were treated with respect at work, more likely to say that they ate good food, and to your point, more likely to say that they experienced love that day. So yes, Paul McCartney, money can buy you love.
Same question as I ask you every time, Tamaine. What do you think about that one?
I thought it was pretty good. As someone who doesn't like reading economics books on holiday, like Damien, I actually thought this book was really good, really interesting. Listened to the audiobook, and yeah, it was great. Loads of insight, loads of like interesting things about life and the world. So,
Maybe you should try reading the book. Might sharpen those skills a bit, mate.
My reading skills.
Yeah, your listening skills are incredible, but yeah. I knew I was going to throw you under the bus. I looked at it, I was like, that 1,000-year thing looks weird there.
Set me right up.
Yeah, it was brilliant. But I'm sorry, mate. I'm sorry. And people must think I'm awful to you. You should see what he's like to me in the real world. But if you don't and you want to live in this little content bubble that we produce, there's 2 episodes here that we think you should check out. So we mentioned Hamish McRae in that one, so we'll link his episode. And then Russell Napier is the guy who put forward the argument that deflation isn't always bad, and that actually we shouldn't have chased 2% inflation, and we should have let prices come down across the globe because of China. So if you want a counter to what was being said there, check that one out. I think it's really good.